What's going on? Let's do this. Part 5, right? The Winter Hibiscus. Hopefully, we had a good class discussion. Hopefully, we sang, she failed, and now she has to walk back. And David has that cheerleader. There's no Big Mac's going to be eaten. So she has to, adding further insult, she has to walk back. Probably she could have driven back, maybe. David didn't take her all the way home for some reason. I don't know. I don't think that was the plan anyways, but blonde cheerleader there, so she has to walk back. Of course, she's going to be devastated. And on top of that, we're going to learn a little bit about Sang's past here. All right. Remember, she's from Laos. I think we've discussed quite a few times. She probably has experienced some sort of war. All right. We ended on paragraph 82. 82. Glasses on. It helps. Make this a little bigger. All right. I will probably say that town wrong. Ban Vai, Thailand, 1978. Oh, and she's standing in the middle of the street, too. Things clicked into place, but it was no use knowing the name and number of the channel. The fear and dread still suffused her. She still felt like the scared, bone-weary little girl she had been, being herded into the barbed wire fencing of the refugee camp after they had escaped across the Mekong River in Laos. What are you doing? Standing in the middle of the road. Get out of the way. And click. The Thai soldier was the test instructor again. Sang blinked away the fear and fatigue of that memory, and slowly that old reality receded. Oh, great word. Receded. It's a lot like my hairline right here. Yeah. Slowly disappearing. That's receded. So the memory is slowly disappearing. Also, if you ever go to the beach, the tide comes in and then it recedes. Great word to know. Maybe you can use it in your writing one day. Receded. It's a hurtful word, though. Reminds me of my hair. In a daze, she turned and made her way over to the curb, stepped onto it, and started walking away. Breathe deep. Don't break down, she told herself fiercely. She could imagine David and that cheerleader staring at her, behind her back. I'm tough, she thought. I'm strong. I can take it. The sidewalk was littered with little acorns, and she kicked at them viciously as she walked and walked. Only when she had turned the corner and was safely out of the sight of David and the others did she finally stop. She found herself standing under a huge tree whose widespread branches were almost now leafless. An acorn dropped down and hit her on the head, bouncing off into the street. It seemed like the final indignity. All right. The way I think of indignity, unless anybody knows. Dignity. Well, I guess what is dignity? The opposite is indignity. All right. The way, I'll pause just in case. The way I think of dignity is when you have something happen that's private, you want it to stay private. So I think there's actually a funeral home around here called Dignity, or the company they use. So, of course, when people pass away, you want it to be dignified. You don't want, I don't want to get too grisly, but, during war, sometimes the bodies aren't, carefully taken care of, things like that, whatever. So with Dignity, all that private stuff is kept behind closed doors. Like, you don't have to see it in public. One thing I always feel bad about, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't feel bad because they're only dogs or whatever, but like a dog going to the bathroom on like someone's lawn in public, I'm like, I kind of feel, I'm sure the dog doesn't care, just going to the bathroom. I don't know, what do you want to call it? Dropping a deuce or whatever. But in front of everybody, I feel bad. Like when the dog looks at you, like, I try not to look at the dog, but maybe, dignity, of course, when someone's going to the bathroom, you don't want them to have to go in the street. That wouldn't be very dignified if they had to go in the street. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. Dignity. So she's being certainly embarrassed in front of everybody. Like, she's having a very private moment. You would think she just wants to be in her room, maybe crying, she's on the street corner, and then a little acorn hits her on the head. All right, in just a minute, we're going to talk about symbolism again, because the author uses symbolism here. I thought the way the story started out was a little bit boring and a little weird. I'm like, come on, they got to go back to this. But I don't want to talk about it quite yet. Somebody, I'm sure, will remember here. Excuse me. Remember here. It seemed like the final indignity. Angrily, Sang reached up for the branch directly over her head and tore off some of the large brown leaves still left. They were dry and crisp, and she crushed them in her hands. She threw them at the wind and watched the bits of brown being whipped away by the afternoon wind. All right. I don't want to say too much about this. This is like some upper level, like you definitely couldn't have done this in elementary school. People are not born thinking this way. But as people's brains develop, it's just a thing. Starting in about the 7th grade, people can think in this abstract way. There's something that's not quite on the page. Yes, she's tearing up leaves. They're brown. They're dying. Think back to the way she acted at the beginning of the story. Okay, there's some symbolism there. All right, so this is a pretty deep topic. Those leaves might symbolize her mood. At the beginning of the story, she kept those leaves in a textbook, not the same leaves, but those types of leaves in the textbook, carefully, made sure everything was okay. And then a teacher told her you need to take, and then they died and they crumbled. So the leaves could represent or symbolize how Sang is feeling. So caring for those leaves, kind of like a mother, coddling them. And then now she's mad and tearing up the leaves. So the leaves could represent how she feels on the inside. Maybe the first time you've ever talked about symbolism like that, but I know in high school that will happen more and more. That's one of the things I loved about studying English in college. And some people are just like, they're leaves, who cares? I get it. Sorry. But just sometimes you can read in a different way. All right, almost done here. This will be a little bit shorter, and there won't be a cliffhanger here. Hopefully you like this story. I hope you do. I do. That doesn't mean you do, right? All right, who cares? I don't know how many people have felt like this when you don't get something you want or read it, whatever. Who cares about the test anyway? She said in a tight, grim whisper, tearing up another fistful of oak leaves. Stupid test, stupid David, stupid cars. Who needs a license anyway? Who needs a test like that? It would only get harder too, she realized, with the winter approaching and the streets turning slippery in the slush and snow. She barely felt safe walking on the sidewalks in the winter. How could she possibly hope to drive then? It was hopeless. Useless to even try. I won't. I just won't ever take that test again, Sang told herself. That resolve felt somewhat better. She turned away from the oak tree and was about to leave when she suddenly noticed the bush next to it. There was something familiar about it. Some of its leaves had already blown off, but those that remained were still green. Oh, that could be also symbolic. What could those, again, this is very tough, I think. What could those green leaves represent? All right. Just because I've done this a lot, I've mentioned before, fall, winter sometimes symbolizes death. Spring, summer, everything growing back. Let's take the leaves. They're growing back on the trees. There's a rebirth. Those green leaves could represent hope. Even though everything is dying around her, all the leaves, there's still some green ones hanging on. If she could just hang on a little bit longer, maybe she could, make it in this country. Socially, whatever, David, all that stuff. There's hope. The little green leaves symbolize hope. Almost done here. Last paragraph. Let's do that. She picked up a leaf and examined it. It was vaguely heart-shaped. Okay, maybe a little more symbolism with deeply serrated edges. Man, I could go into this deeply with the symbolism. Some people probably don't care. But those cuts on the edge of the heart It could represent all the times she's been hurt. A serrated knife is a good knife for like cutting bread. It's almost like it has teeth on it, serrated. So it's still intact. The leaf is still intact. It's heart-shaped, but it looks like it's been through some stuff, some deep cuts on the edge of it. But it's still, the soul of it is still there. I don't want to get too deep, but that's probably what it's trying to represent. Where's she seen this kind of leaf before? Sang wondered. And why among all these foreign maple and oak leaves did it seem so very familiar? She scrutinized the bush, but there's no help. If there had been any flowers on it, they'd already fallen off. All right, good place for us to stop. 92, got a little deep there with the symbolism. And for those of you who hate that kind of stuff, I'm sorry. But that's kind of what English class is kind of reading deeply into things, writing about them. Speaking of writing, there is the Google form, part 1 of the Winter Hibiscus you could be filling out. Any other work you have in class, I'll come around to everybody, and we'll do a little Frankenbeans. How about that? And then you'll be out of here. Good news. Nothing lasts forever. All right.